Your phone vibrates, a reminder that there is no service here. There are no other cars in the dirt parking lot, only yours. The giant maples and oaks that glance down at you have seen many generations before you come and go. The outside world changes at an impossible pace, but this place somehow remains the same, and its timelessness is not lost on you. The order of crickets which serenade your walk down the overgrown sandy path have been on this earth 300 million years longer than the Great Lakes. Beneath your feet, limestone and dolomite whisper ancient tales of continental drift and glacial invasions. The echoing waves of Lake Huron draw nearer and nearer with every step. As far as the outside world is concerned, you're a ghost, and there's no one around. But that doesn't mean you're alone. You felt their presence the moment you stepped out of the car, and as you stop, you feel them now. They're there, behind you, always behind you. You know, my freshwater friends, nothing can haunt you quite like hemorrhoids. And when I find myself with a burning that even 1 trillion gallons of fresh water can't quench, I reach for a tube of Hemorrhoid Harbor butt cream. Yes, Hemorrhoid Harbor butt cream. Its unique cooling formula will get you back on your path in no time. Life's a beach, but it doesn't have to be with Hemorrhoid Harbor butt cream, because nothing haunts like hemorrhoids. Hello and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 18 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today, I would like to present to you a free promotional gift as a valued listener. What is this gift? Well, it's this very moment. This moment of uncomfortable dissonance that you and I now find ourselves in as we try to shake unwanted visual imagery from our minds and observe the damage that poorly placed advertising can do to a fragile audio ecosystem. I do think you'll find that this gift can be used as a useful reminder as we embark on today's strange journey. We're headed to the shores of Lake Huron to a homemade recording studio. It's here where we'll learn just what can be at stake when we decide to sell a piece of our soul, as words that we once called our own cease to echo about the water. Episode 18. Exchanged. The rising sun cut through the morning sky like a big orange thing, Elaine wrote, before ripping the page from her notebook and crumbling it up. With a sigh, the 47-year-old amateur poet turned podcast host patted her own knee in assurance. It's all right, Laney, she told herself. They can't all be winners. Elaine gazed up from her park bench, looking out across Lake Huron's narrow and beautiful Culpoise Bay. In front of her, boats were being launched out into the deep blue-hued waters. Behind her, Elaine's lifelong hometown of Wiarton, Ontario, was leisurely beginning its weekend. Her wristwatch beeped. 10:50 a.m. Almost time to meet this week's guest. She took a deep breath, inhaling as much confidence as she could hold before releasing it. Time to do this. Elaine spent the 10-minute walk from the city's lakefront Blue Water Park to the Green Door Cafe, reviewing her note cards. She had never had a guest with this much notoriety before, and she had to get it right. The poet she was interviewing was from Toronto, grew up in Montreal, published work, all big sellers, engaged to be married, loves dogs, dislikes cats, loves the color blue, can't stand poutine, and don't you dare mention the Toronto Maple Leafs. Shoving her notes back into her overflowing equipment bag, Elaine looked up, taking in the sights and sounds of her beloved downtown Wiarton. In one of her earlier poems, Elaine described her hometown as Blenderville. She observed a clashing of architectural styles, making it seem as if elements from several Canadian freshwater coastal towns had been picked up blended, and then scattered up and down the main street, Highway 6. Classic 2-story brick buildings would stand tall between modern one-level shops dressed in the most modern facades. The chain restaurant was sandwiched between a small-town pharmacy and a family-owned antique store. The pawn shop and thrift store sat directly opposite an upscale home decor gallery. There was even a small hotel that gave off kind of a Wild West vibe. Elaine's rendezvous point this morning was at the Green Door Cafe. As soon as she entered, Elaine darted towards an open booth. Booths were perfect for recording. She ordered a cup of tea, to which she added her own honey, also perfect for recording. And in just a few minutes, all of her gear was set up, next to, of course, the heavily bookmarked collective works of her guest. Elaine did notice other people in the cafe glancing at her and her setup, which always put a smile on her face. It was a smile, however, that faded the very second her phone rang. No, you suck, Elaine moaned to her phone through her pocket, knowing exactly who it was. She answered her phone with an enthusiastic good morning, and she was correct in her assumption. Her guest, regretfully of course, canceled. Elaine of course thanked her for her time, tossed her phone up on the table, and just hung her head. She was defeated. Utterly defeated. As she began to pick up her gear, Elaine ordered a quick to-go brunch, and as she waited, she noticed a well-dressed man sitting diagonally across the cafe from her. She exchanged a couple of uncomfortable glances before she realized that he was just staring directly at her. The man looked to be in his mid to late 30s, dressed in a soft beige two-piece suit with a beige tie over a blue shirt. His skin was an odd color of spray tan, and his teeth were shining so brightly that it gave him an almost cartoonish smile. Elaine raised her coffee cup and just mouthed the words, "Good morning." The man then managed to smile even wider somehow, seemingly very glad that she had noticed him. He slowly and robotically raised his cup, never once breaking his gaze, moving his head, or even blinking. Then, as if being pulled up by strings like a marionette, the man rose to his feet. He awkwardly approached Elaine's booth, tugging on his perfectly tailored suit as if it didn't fit properly, and invited himself to sit down. Elaine didn't know what to say, so she just stammered out an awkward, "Can I help you?" The man replied with a slow and distinct voice, and he did so in a very unusual dialect, as if the man were trying to fake a watered-down southern drawl. "Well, Miss Elaine, maybe in fact we can help each other. You host that charming little show about poetry, right?" Elaine couldn't hide her uncomfortable expression as she asked him how he could possibly have known her name, let alone what she did. Without moving his head, the man's eyes darted down towards Elaine's equipment bag. Embroidered on the front flap was her podcast's logo, as well as the show's name, The Great Lakeside Poet's Quill. Elaine let out a somewhat relieved laugh. "Oh, yeah, I read my own poems and stuff. I have some locals on, try to interview big names when I can. It's just fun, really." The man leaned forward, uncomfortably close to Elaine's face, and cocked his head in an unnatural jerking motion. "The work you do is more important than you know, and more people listen than you realize, Miss Elaine. And that's why I came down here to see you today. I'd like to offer you a sponsorship opportunity." As the man spoke, Elaine found herself completely unnerved. He seemed frozen, as if animatronic. She noticed the way that he had not blinked a single time yet. Thankful to see her waitress with her bagged order, Elaine quickly paid in cash and clumsily grabbed all of her gear to exit the booth. "That's very kind, but I'm not interested. This is just my hobby," she said to the man. She then stopped, as the man was seeming to mouth the exact same words that she was saying as she said them. Without a second's hesitation, the man replied, "I figured you'd want to ponder the idea for a while, so I had an associate leave an envelope at your home address. He just slid it between your screen door and your front door." Elaine didn't dare stop to ask how the man knew where she lived. She just got out of there, quickly. The man said loudly as Elaine exited the cafe, "Consider it, miss. $1,000 is a lot of money." Elaine practically jogged home, using the sides of parked vehicles and storefront window reflections to ensure that she was not being followed. When she arrived at home, the envelope was there, just as promised. Inside were 2 pages, both printed on thick pieces of cover stock. Page 1 included simple instructions. A deposit of $1,000 Canadian will be made to your checking account once the attached promotional material has been included at the beginning of your next episode. Page 2 contained the copy, which in its entirety simply read, "This program is brought to you by Dalitcher's Bistro in Wiarton." Elaine had lived in Wiarton her whole life. She had never once before heard the name Dalitcher's. She checked online just to be sure, and nothing. There wasn't, and never had been, a bistro named Dalitcher's anywhere in town, or for that matter, apparently the world. Elaine had a strange feeling. This whole thing was so unusual. I mean, how could he, even possibly have her checking account info for deposit? Her intuition was screaming at her to toss the envelope in the trash, or better yet, contact a police officer. But what would she say? The guy didn't do anything wrong. He was just weird. Elaine grabbed the offer and took one final glance at the strange advertising copy before setting off to record it. The second she submitted the episode, her phone vibrated. A notification from her online banking service. A deposit had been made in the amount of $1,000 from Dalitcher's Bistro. At once, the pit in Elaine's stomach made it clear that she had made a mistake, and the chain of events that followed would reveal the strange price for her decision. Elaine opened her audio editing program to delete the message and re-upload the episode without it, but as she did so, she received an error message. To continue using her editing software, she would need to sign up for a subscription. What? She had one. It was prepaid annually, and she had had it for years. Clicking log in, Elaine entered her username and password, only to be met with another error message saying that no such account existed. Elaine opened up a web browser to access the email account that she had set up specifically for the show, and there she was greeted by, yet again, a similar message. This account does not exist. After pausing for a moment, she got to work investigating, and the results of her investigation left her speechless. Her website was no longer active, and despite having well over a year left before she'd have to renew, tglpquill.com was for sale. Her personal social media pages were untouched, but all of the show-specific pages had been deleted. Her podcast hosting site showed that nothing existed under her username, and that no show called The Great Lakeside Poets Quill had ever existed. A Google search for the show's name revealed nothing, not a trace of anything relevant. The comments that she had recently left in various threads had all been removed, and even the cloud drive containing all of her previous episodes was now completely empty. Her show, for all intents and purposes, had simply never existed. Okay, there has to be something, Elaine said to herself, diving across the room to grab her equipment bag. The SD memory card in her portable recorder, which should have contained gigabytes of raw audio from previous interviews, was entirely blank. She then closed her eyes briefly before summoning the courage to glance at her equipment bag's flap, which fortunately still did contain the show logo, Okay, progress, Elaine said. All right, what else can we check? Them, the audience, the guests. From there, Elaine embarked on several hours' worth of frustrating phone conversations. And when she was done, she angrily threw her phone into the corner of the room and just began to cry. Many of the people who were avid listeners had just reported to Elaine that they were completely unaware she ever had a show, including her own parents, who would listen every single week and now could only vaguely remember her even having an idea for a podcast. Less than half of her close friends had any recollection of her ever hosting the show, even though she did for several years, and the ones that did remember it were confused as to why the show completely disappeared from their podcast apps. And somehow, only about a third of the guests that Elaine had interviewed over the years were able to confirm ever being on the show. From the corner of the room, Elaine's phone vibrated once again, a deposit reminder. All she could bring herself to do was weep, as she raised her trembling hand to the now cracked screen and pressed reject payment. The following morning found Elaine back at the lakefront. She was sitting in the grass at the water's edge, with her notebook in her lap, as she wrote. The rising sun cut through the morning sky like a fiery sword, a fire eternal, unquenchable, and true, a fire of passion or a fire of hell. This morning is yours, and this choice up to you. Let your soul waver not as you fight for what's true, for love, for freedom, for joy, and for all that you do. I do owe you a sincere apology if you happened to have spent this episode en route to your local apothecary, as I must confess that Hemorrhoid Harbor butt cream is not a real product, obviously, and thankfully. But then, if you search any Maps app, any restaurant review thread, or even use a fine-tooth comb on the Wiarton public records, neither is the name Dalacher's Bistro. Additionally, I can confirm as an avid subscriber to every podcast that has the word great or lake in the title, I've never once heard of a production called The Great Lakeside Poets Quill. I think such a program would be right up my alley, and I feel like I would have found it by now. So, what do we make of this unusual experience? It turns out that Elaine and myself both shared the same initial impression. At first glance, the story arc seems to fit that perfect monkey's paw narrative. A suave but sinister salesman offers you what you want the most at the expense of what you already had. Elaine was simply tempted, succumbed to the temptation, and then had to pay the associated price. But the more we both thought about it, the more we began to realize that this theory just isn't seaworthy. Would Elaine have sold her entire beloved podcast for $1,000? Absolutely not. In fact, she initially rejected the offer. She's not a greedy or money-motivated kind of person at all. Elaine simply thought for a moment, why not? It would be cool to get some extra cash to provide her guests with some better interview equipment. And that doesn't seem selfish, really. Kind of noble. Also, she didn't violate any ethical codes. It's not like she falsely endorsed the restaurant. She just said that the program was sponsored by them, which would have been true. I thought possibly for a while we were looking at a Men in Black kind of situation, seeing as how the man didn't blink and seemed uncomfortable in his own skin. However, based on what we do know about the Men in Black, one would have to imagine that the MIBs would show little interest in amateur poetry about the Great Lakes. It wasn't until one evening, when Elaine was babysitting her nieces and nephews, that she stumbled upon a possible explanation. Her eldest niece had asked her to read the Berenstain Bears. Elaine corrected her, saying it was Berenstein Bears. Her niece then pointed to the book cover and said, no, it wasn't. It's actually, and always has been, Berenstain Bears. Elaine grabbed her cell phone and immediately called me. When I answered, she simply said the words, Mandela Effect. If you're unfamiliar with the Mandela Effect, it can be described as a group of people who strangely and often vividly share a false memory. The term itself was derived from the large percentage of people worldwide who have specific memories of the activist Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, when in reality, he was released and went on to become president of South Africa, not passing until much later in 2013. And just like Elaine with the Berenstain Bears, you may be experiencing this strange Mandela effect for yourself if you have any of the following incorrect memories. Watching a genie movie called Shazam, starring Sinbad. Mickey Mouse wearing suspenders. Curious George having a tail. The Monopoly Man having a monocle. The Fruit of the Loom logo featuring a brown cornucopia over there on the right-hand side. Pikachu having a black zigzag pattern on his tail. Captain Kirk ever once saying, "Beam me up, Scotty." Gandalf instructing his party to run, you fools. Or Darth Vader delivering the iconic phrase, Luke, I am your father. If you have any recollection of any of these, indeed, my friend, welcome to the Mandela Effect. So perhaps we find ourselves simply needing to add Dalitcher's Bistro and the Great Lakeside Poet's Quill to that list. And although neither Elaine nor myself could manage to contact anyone who could recall a restaurant being in Wiarton by that name, the responses we did get when we reached out were kind of unusual. Many people said they vaguely remembered the name, but couldn't give any specifics. Normally, when I do my own research, I start by calling local businesses and organizations near the vicinity of wherever the strange event occurred. And when I did in this case, several people, unprompted, recalled vividly the colors gray and maroon being associated with Dalitchers. One person said they think they remember chintzy-looking maroon cloth napkins resting on an ugly gray tablecloth, and another person said the sign itself was worn out but featured large maroon letters over a flat gray background. Another kind of eerie but funny fact was that almost everybody I spoke to remembered Dalitchers in a negative sense. One person went so far as to tell me they remember the food being terrible, and when I asked them what they'd served or what they'd eaten, they replied they couldn't remember because they had never been there. And it seems like nobody had. Not a single person could tell me anything more than a vague recollection, with one very notable exception. I spoke to one resident who immediately put a physical location to the name, just off William Street by the boat launch. Elaine's go-to location for writing. Indeed, the very place that she was relaxing at when she had the idea for the podcast in the first place. Elaine did say that she plans on starting a new podcast, and of course I would love to share that info with you if and when it happens. But then again, who knows? Maybe we've already heard it. And with that, thank you sincerely for listening. Here's hoping your harbor is fresh and barnacle-free, and here's hoping that your adventures are as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.